Today's episode holds a special place in my heart. I love all my episodes, but today I have Kristen Harlow, who is a medium and is the facilitator of the mediumship circle that I always talk about, the one that got me to do what I'm doing with you today, talking about mediumship and also practicing my mediumship abilities. We talk about a wide variety of topics related to channeling as a medium and spirituality, and even down to the awakening that is happening, that we think is happening right now in our culture regarding psychic abilities and people coming to understand that they are also psychic and connected. You'll hear it here on Third Eyesight. My name is Juan Francisco, and I'm a psychic medium and tarot card reader. I've always been curious about the supernatural, the paranormal, and psychic abilities, and I'm here to share my stories and interview folks who want to share their own stories with us. Let's get to it. Hey, Kristen, it's so good to see you.
Juan, hi. Good to see you too.
I'm just going and joke around. Like, we were just saying we're going to start the recording and act as if we just started seeing each other when we hit record, but obviously we were chatting beforehand. But anyways, I'm so excited to chat with you. I've known you since summer 2021 when I first joined your mediumship circle, which I have talked about a lot on this podcast and how much it's changed my life. We'll go into that, but tell folks how do you relate to the spiritual realm in terms of your practice, your abilities? What would you consider yourself?
Well, I would call myself a psychic medium, I guess, if that's what you mean. I think that we're all connected to spirit at all times. It's just a matter of being aware of it, right, in the moment. So the way I think to bring that awareness is through meditation, through practice at circles like ours, and practicing with readings and giving as many readings as possible as well. And just listening to the silence and hearing what's coming through and trying to be intuitive in all of my choices, all of the things I do, trying to be open to what I believe spirit is communicating to me, what I believe God is communicating to me, and work with that and ask for help when things become challenging, especially, judgments or jealousies or resentments or that kind of thing. Just asking for help and calling in spirit, I think, really opens you even more to your mediumship skills. And I would say that I'm definitely clairsentient, clairvoyant, claircognizant. Sometimes have some of the others as well, but those are my three strongest mediumship clairs.
Very cool. And
Yeah.
I've heard you, I want to go back to your beginnings, like how you discovered this ability. And I agree. I believe we all have the ability. I prefer to not call it a gift, but in a way it is a gift, but it's also something we all have, not just given to the chosen few. But that being said, I've heard you share before with me, with other folks that we've been in the same room with, that you've always had a big fascination with the supernatural since you were very young, and that's how you feel it started for you. So could you delve a bit into what was that fascination like, and what was your first experience connecting with the departed?
Sure. And also just to note that it is a gift, but so is the human brain, so is the eye, so is the heart, right? So it's a human gift.
Absolutely.
So yeah, when I was very young, when I was like 4 years old, my grandmother, who had lost her husband in an accident when she was 26, told me that she heard a voice telling her that he was going to pass the week before he did. And that it fascinated me for some reason at that age. And I would make her repeat the story over and over and over. And there was only so much she could repeat, right? I mean, it's like pretty brief story. They were driving down a road together that they always drove down. She heard a voice say, "You'll never drive down this road with him again." She understood what it meant. And he passed away a week later. And I would say, "Tell me the story again. Tell me the story again. What did it sound like? What was it in the car? Did he hear it?" And she was like, "Chrissy, there's only so much, that's all I can tell you. That's the story." And she had a couple of other things that she shared as well about her experience with with spirit, but that just, it set me off on a path of just fascination about all things that the regular society would consider strange, especially at that time. Nowadays, people are a little bit more open to these types of things, but back then it was like there were no ghost shows or anything like that, you know? So I would go to the library and read about it and ask everybody to tell me, you know, do you have any ghost stories? Is your house haunted? All through my life, all through college. Had some experiences for sure, some really cool experiences with which I think you and I talked about before. But by the time I hit the age of like maybe 25, 26, I was surrounded by people who labeled themselves atheists. So I didn't, you know, ignore my interest in the spiritual side of life, but I kind of put it to the side. You know, I would still go on ghost tours, I would still be interested, I'd feel things, I'd know that a house had a spirit that was active in it, although I think all houses have spirits that are active, but you know, you can really feel particular homes. And so I kind of put it to sleep for a while, and then when I think it was probably 15 years ago or so, suddenly my life began to kind of crumble. All kinds of real emotional blows hit. And I went through a period of deep, deep mourning. And after about 6 months of that, I was beginning to practice meditation, silent meditation, and really try to heal myself. And one day I had this really incredible out of body meditation experience that went on for 45 minutes. And at the time I was meditating for 10, you know. And after that experience, all of my gifts opened up. Literally right after that, all of my gifts opened up. My clairsentience really came alive. My clairvoyance totally alive. Seeing spirit in 3D, seeing spirit in my third eye, just all came alive after that meditation. And I started practicing and organizing the gift and going to circles and trying to understand it. And here I am today. So that's kind of a brief, you know, rundown.
Wow. Could you actually share when you say out of body experience during that 10-minute meditation turned 45-minute meditation, uh, what was that like for you? What could you walk us through what that out of body experience was like?
Sure, sure. It was the most powerful, one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had. I think maybe the most powerful. Just to throw in there, at the time, for some reason, I became interested in numerology, and I always noticed 1111 or 308, but I really started to become interested in it and would look up numbers, and it's relevant to what happened in this meditation. So that put that to the side. I sat down, normal day, morning, and began meditating, and all of a sudden I found myself in the sky. And I looked down, and there was this enormous structure below. I was way, way up high, like as high as a bird, and looked down below. There's this structure, and it looked like a pyramid, but not really. It looked like a mountain, but not really. And at the base, there were some openings. And I looked at it for a while and then found myself diving down to the opening of this structure. And then I was in the structure. And I was walking down this tunnel, this pathway that was lit by something. I don't really know what. And I could feel myself moving, and I could feel that I had no control over it. So much so that I tried to turn to the left, and I immediately went back on the path I was on. It was like some kind of energetic thing that I was breaking through. And I walked and walked and walked, and then finally came to a room that had a triangular kind of altar. And all of a sudden, on each of the tips of the triangle, fire burst out. And then a column began to rise from the center of this triangle. And it was this huge column, and faces appeared on it, a cross appeared on it, and it just rose and rose. And then suddenly there was a scaffolding on it, and I was on the scaffolding, and I rose with the column through like 3 levels of light, I think it was. And I got to the top, and was again in a hallway, but could feel that I was at the top, could just kind of see more light. And finally, I came to a window that had no glass, just open window. And I looked down, and there was this turret type thing down below on this platform, and a path leading to the turret on the left side. And out in the distance, just vast brown desert kind of look. And suddenly, as I'm looking, I heard a voice say, "You will go there." And it wasn't a female voice, it wasn't a male voice, it was a godly voice, you know, it was just not human. And I started to ask questions, and I could feel that that wasn't going to get me anywhere. And the voice said, "You will go there again." And then my phone went off, and I came to and looked and saw that it had been 45 minutes, and was like, wow. Went to wash my face or something, and all of a sudden heard the number 37, I think it was, in my mind. And so I went and looked it up, and as usually happens with these things, I was taken immediately to the page that I needed to be taken to. And probably the next day the page disappeared, right? Probably never. But it took me to 37 BC, which is when Herod took over this fortress called Masada and turned it into his palace, one of his palaces. And I looked it up, and it was the exact place that I saw, down to the turret, down to the
Wow.
like seeming openings. And I don't think there are openings at the base, but I think that was an energetic thing. And then later, I would ask my spirit guides questions, and suddenly this car service appeared whenever I asked a question called Masada. It
Get
would
out
say
of here.
on the side of the car. That happened a few times. So
Wow.
yeah, after that, you know, I just everything exploded really, truly in an incredible way. And I didn't know. Maybe I'd heard of Masada at some point, but I didn't know about Masada at all. It's got this great history, and it's really an interesting place in Israel. So yeah, that's that.
I've never heard of Masada before, actually. And wow, that's an incredible retelling you just gave us. And the desert that you got a peek at, that you got the opportunity to peek out through that open window, um, was that something metaphorical to you, or did you literally go visit this place, or do you plan to? What was when the voice told you, you will see this place, or you will be in this place again, you will be
You
there
will go
again?
there. Yeah.
Right. What did that mean to you?
It's one of the great questions of my life. What did it mean? I do want to go there. It's a very holy place, actually. It's a pilgrimage place in Israel. It's about an hour and a half from Jerusalem, and it's right on the Dead Sea. So the whole area is desert, and it is very brown. So I think I was seeing the actual surroundings. But you will go there. I feel I can't help but feel that partially I'm supposed to go there literally. And I was planning to in April of 2020, but then of course the pandemic hit. But I think it's also metaphorical, and I don't understand it yet. I think it's going to be a lifetime of understanding it until I do. But it truly is one of the great questions of my life that I think about regularly. That's why I tell it so succinctly, because I think about it a lot. You know, it was just so incredible, so incredible.
It's very powerful. And this kind of this makes me want to ask you, because you mentioned that before this experience, I'm not sure what the time was between, you mentioned 15 years ago, there were what it seemed to be thing after thing of emotional hardship. And then this happened. What was the timing between the struggles that you encountered in life and this experience?
Well, there were a few that happened, you know, about 15 years ago. And then about, you know, I guess I won't get too specific. It doesn't really matter, I guess, in terms of when the stuff happened, but all kinds of things happened within a year. Lots of incredible loss, illness and loss and divorce, all within a year. And then when the divorce happened, which was totally out of the blue and I wasn't expecting, and was just completely, you know, just devastated me along with the other awful things. It was about 6 months from the time that I really began grieving all of it to the time that that meditation happened. So,
And the reason I asked is because I have heard, well, I'm going to zoom out a bit and think kind of meta. 2020 and the COVID-19 pandemic and a lot of the loss, different levels of loss, whether it was mortalities that year, people losing their jobs, maybe their homes that they couldn't pay for them during that year because of loss of work, a lot of hardship that year, that during that same year and the year after, I feel like, including for myself, this boom in interest slash a reawakening in people spiritually. And there have been a lot of stories I've heard of people, for lack of a better word, like how traumatic experiences sometimes quickly or in due time lead to a reawakening of the self, which I guess I'm not a psychologist, but from a mental psychological standpoint, I guess deciding what we do with that trauma, what our next step is, can definitely lead to uh, self-empowerment. We make a different decision, or we decide to do something new with our lives as part of the healing process. But I want to zero in on what are your thoughts on, whether it's your own personal experience, what you know, hearing other people's stories, on the connection between trauma and discovering or rediscovering our spiritual abilities and connection?
I 100% think that's what happened for me. I also know that I had the propensity beforehand, and I think that's kind of a necessity too. Although I'm sure it's not always the case that people had propensity before and then after they have the awakening. There's shamanism and the way that young boys usually are sent into the woods and, at 14 and have a kind of faux near-death experience and then have their awakening. But I think that that's what that mirrors, are those traumas that force you to look inward, force you to cleanse. The divorce that happened was out of the blue, and I was kind of the victim of it, but I wasn't. I mean, it takes two, right? And so fortunately, I was able to look at my own role in that thing that happened, and then also to at the same time grieve the losses that had preceded that. And so it created an opening. I think these traumatic events create openings that then allow spirit to almost flow through us. It happens with childbirth too. Apparently, people who have children sometimes will just have a complete awakening after that trauma, because it's an enormous trauma, right? And it makes sense that COVID, that stood in for that kind of trauma. I was just thinking yesterday about how beautiful it is, how many people are coming to see the possibilities of pursuing healing, of pursuing spirit, of pursuing all of these things that 20 years ago you were cuckoo. If you were interested in these things, you were new age, you were this, you were that.
Yep.
Now new age is the age.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful. Sometimes I get a little judgmental about it because, you'll see like Real Housewives of New York at like,
With their sage
uh,
feather and
right, and like smoking, in what do you call it, smoking lodges and that kind of thing. But then I think to myself, why not? Why shouldn't the Real Housewives also have it? That's even more beautiful, that people who are so materialistic and locked into the body and all that also are having their own version of an awakening in this life, and we are a part of that. We're present for that. And it makes a lot of sense, I think, that COVID would have set that off in a way. Although I do think that this has been happening for a while. Matt Kahn actually started talking about September 2015 being a time of great, great, great awakening, that many, many people were going to have this sort of experience that I had, and the timing matches. And that there was just going to be this influx of ascension energy. And so I think it started then, but then I think maybe COVID was like the second wave of that, because he said that there were going to be waves, different waves.
it's really interesting that you referenced his note on September 2015. I'm just thinking about what was happening. I guess, and not to get political, we don't have to get political here, but what was happening in this country, I'm thinking of who was running for president at that time.
Mhm.
That was the year before we had that president in office. And this is a very controversial statement, that people on all sides don't like to hear, but I think I have my own opinions on those 4 years of all those political things that were going on, and a lot of negative feelings personally about that. But it was like, I call it the country's growing pain,
Mm-hmm.
because there's so many things that came out of the woodwork that we thought were of the past, that maybe we
Mm-hmm.
needed to face ourselves in a mirror,
Yep.
so to speak, and think,
Yep.
oh, America still deals with racism and um, lots of other types of prejudices, and maybe we need to reconsider. Like, we need a soul search a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it's interesting that Matt Kahn notes September 2015. I'm not saying that's the reason, but I'm sure there's so many reasons, personal and societal, or things that we can connect to what Matt Kahn said. Um, but yeah, I think it's very interesting how today it is almost sexy to be interested in all things
Yeah.
metaphysical, and it's there's so much interest in astrology, and for me, tarot was my bridge to mediumship, and I think for a lot of people, I'm seeing astrology as a way that many people are exploring other things about, whether it's moon phases, or then maybe it's crystals, and maybe from crystals to reiki. There's so many bridges I see in pop culture
Mm-hmm.
that people are using to explore even further in this realm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would like to ask you, what has been and usually I say this question for last, but I'm so curious to hear it now. What for you has been the biggest, or what for you is the most valuable, and I'm sure there are many, but the most valuable, I'm gonna call it a lesson or learning, that I'll call it a learning, that you've gained from delving into practicing your ability of connecting with the spirit world?
I think that in my reading, my research, my own experiences with spirit, I think probably the greatest lesson is that I need to ask for help in every moment. And this gets more personal than having anything to do with mediumship. And maybe if you mean specifically mediumship, we can address that after. But I really think, just from listening, for instance, or reading and listening, I listened on YouTube to A Course in Miracles, and just and Matt Kahn, and just really delving into healing modalities. I came to understand that with every painful emotion that arises that I might want to lash out from, rather than lashing out, asking for help is the key. And then the help arrives, and you exist with the feeling and allow it to integrate into the whole of who you are. And then you're free from attack. You didn't attack someone, and as a result, and then that clears you, I think, to be able to be more open to spirit, open to God, because you are in a constant conversation, understanding that you really don't have power over your reactions and over you have the choice to ask for help, but we all need the help. We just need help. And when you ask for it, it comes, and the communication continues. And then the the connection to other energies also continues because of that constant communication. So I think that's probably a long answer.
And that's exactly what I meant, is like what you personally take away from this work, from practicing this, because like I was saying, I'm already forgetting if I said this before I hit record on this podcast episode or after, but this has been life changing for me to develop this ability. Not just uh, not just that I feel like I'm improving how I channel, but improving how I manage even my personal relationships. And I think also this work has given for me just different perspective on the value of living in the physical world. Um, I mean, it's hard to be human. It's hard to be human in a life, in a world where there's so many things. You pay taxes, you vote for people, you have jobs, you work hard, and then add on to that all the interpersonal relationships and what comes up with that. But I think the more that I practice this ability, I feel like I'm valuing the things that I get to enjoy, because it can all be gone in an instant
Mm-hmm.
and we don't even know it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and well, and for you, I now, since you mentioned, I do want to ask you also, as part B to this question, what has practicing this work meant for you, um, as a practitioner, like, is there something that you, since let's phrase it this way, since the moment you first started developing this ability, whether it's circles or mentorship, from then up to now, what would you consider have, what would you consider to be the the one thing that, I'm gonna just gonna say it this way, that you're very proud of in how you've developed, or how far you've come?
Uh, well, I mean, I will branch out and answer differently, but I do have to say that what I just said, I'm pretty proud of, because I feel that in most situations, not all, I'm human, but in many situations, I'm able to work through the things that might lead most people to lash out, blame, judge, gossip, all of that. I'm able to go inward and find out what it is within that is being triggered by the thing that would normally cause me to blame someone else. But I'm also, I'm proud of our circle. I'm very proud of our circle, and finding myself in a position where I feel I bring people together to be able to expand these gifts outward and encourage them to follow their own path in that same regard. Maybe it's not starting a circle, but whatever it is, and just really understanding the true connection that we have to the earth, to the elements, to spirit, that is real. It's not an imaginary thing. It's not just, as we said before, it's not just reserved for certain people. It's our innate gift. It's our human gift. And so I'm proud of the community that I am building, that embraces that, and does it with love and gratitude and hope, and lacks competition, and just does it for the good of all, and including the self. I'm also quite amazed at the strength of my connection to spirit, and the when I fully trust myself, the information that comes through, that's verified by the sitter. That's amazing every time. I hope it never stops being amazing. I hope it's always a miracle. It's just amazing. Just
It's amazing to me too. Yeah, and I'm wondering if you've ever experienced in your development, your development journey. Like, sometimes I feel like I get into a, speaking, like, responding to what you just said, sometimes I get into like a period of a lull where I'm thinking, I almost like I take it for granted that I'm practicing this,
Mhm.
and it makes me wonder, like, am I doing something wrong, or are things just going fine? Am I starting to not become impressed with spirit because I'm so used to it? Have you experienced that? And I mean, I also don't want to cease being amazed, and I don't cease to be amazed, but I sometimes just think, like, this is so much a part of my lifestyle that it's like, to other people it's like, whoa, and I'm like, oh, it's just, it is what it is, and maybe there's beauty in that. But I would love to hear your take on that.
I definitely, I look at it that way as well. I'm very gentle with the people that I share that I'm a medium with, because I think you and I surround ourselves in spiritual circles. And so to us, it seems like the whole world is opening to spirit. But actually, if you look at if you look outside that circle, you realize it's actually still kind of small. It's growing, and that's incredible. So, but a lot of people still think it's, maybe you have mental illness, or so I'm gentle with the way I share it. Some people come up with it very strongly and aggressively, and are almost looking for an argument about it, which I understand, because it's sad when somebody can't take it seriously and can't connect with their own gifts that way. But I don't feel aggressive or put off by someone who doesn't believe. I just can tell that it's probably not someone that I really necessarily need to be sharing my gifts with. But I do have a very you know I accept who I am in a very casual way, I would say. I'm not always like, oh, wow, whoa. Sometimes things happen that I'm like, wow. on a regular basis things happen that I'm like, wow. But I don't I'm not in a state of constant, wowzers over it either. Uh, but I think we go through, I think with every passing moon, even we go through upgrades. And it's in those upgrades that usually begin with a challenge of some kind, something that's, not satisfactory to us in our gifts. And after that challenge, we realized that it was showing us what our next what the next stage was for us. And so that's where it becomes new and fresh again, because something new comes out of that challenge. For instance, maybe somebody feels, I just don't feel like I'm connecting anymore. I have no clairsentience. It's not happening. What's going on? And then suddenly they realize that challenge was a teaching tool for them to be able to move to another level of that clairsentience, whatever the teaching tool may be. It's personal. And then they find that clairsentience is even more strong after the fact, and they've leveled up, and they're in that state of amazement for a while until they become a little bit maybe more casual. And then there's another stage to reach, and you just keep growing and growing and growing.
Development never stops. I don't ever want to stop learning. I personally believe to ever arrive at a place where I would say I've mastered it, I
Mm-hmm.
think it's for me, it'd be very presumptuous because I mean, there's so many questions I won't ever get the answers to, and maybe there are other questions that I don't think I will ever have the answer to, but they'll come to me piecemeal along the way in the years to come. And I just kind of think I think about so the way for folks who for those listening, the way I discovered Kristen's mediumship circle, and I think I've told you this, Kristen, it was summer 2021, and this is at a point when I was thinking, okay, I want to go to see mediums and psychics because I can't do it. People have that special gift, and uh I should seek their counsel. So I was on the Meetup app, which you use to spread the word about the circle. And I was honestly looking for ways to get free readings somehow. And like psychic readings, free psychic readings. And your circle came up, I'm like, oh, a whole circle, a whole slew of psychics and mediums in a circle, like a group. Wow, I can get a free reading this night. And I was honestly very advantageous at that time. But I always had a respect for this. It wasn't like I wanted to always center myself in the experience of a psychic. I mean, it was, even though it was a reading, it would be readings for me. I was so, like you, obsessed with the supernatural and the idea that people have this ability, and was obsessed watching these kinds of things growing up. So I had a respect for it, but I was very much looking for readings, especially at a time when I was feeling a little desperate about seeking some answers to things in my life. So that was summer 2021. And at the moment I found the circle, I read into what you had put as the descriptor, the description of the circle. I thought, oh, this is for people to join who people that think they are mediums. I don't think I'm a medium, so I really shouldn't join the circle. But I never unfollowed it. You know, you can like leave, you can
Mm-hmm.
join something, but then you can leave the group and not have access to it anymore. I never decided to leave it. I thought maybe I'll go one day. I don't know. So I left it on there on my Meetup account. And 3 months later, I had my first mediumistic experience in the middle of a tarot card reading with my best friend, whom I was reading. And I was freaking out with joy, freaking out with shock. I didn't know how to feel because it was such an intense experience. And then I remembered, wait, there was that circle that I had thought could be just a way for me to get a free reading. And maybe I could actually use it. And I remember the first circle, the first meet of your circle that I joined, I was in my parents' home in Delaware sitting on the floor, and I was spotlit as a recipient to get a reading. But I also participated and tried to give someone else a reading. I thought this is really cool. And so I've said this to you offline. I mean to say, said this to you offline, and I'll say it here too. It's like your circle has honestly changed my life because sure, there may have been other avenues I could have taken, but the fact is the avenue I took was your circle, and that's what made me feel comfortable. And a lot of that comfort has to do with how you facilitate it. That's what made me feel comfortable wanting to explore this ability. And I've had some of the most life-changing experiences giving readings in that circle my first year that you've been
Hmm.
witness to. And I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that circle. And so I always sing praises about join a circle, join a circle. So much so that I've had people listen to my podcast and say, which circle are you in? Because I want to, and so a few people have
You should
joined it.
definitely tell them to come. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember your first join, and I remember you giving a reading, and I remember being spot on that first reading. And I don't know if you remember that.
I see. I remember being semi spot on, but I remember I channeled the soul of a boy. I think it was for, I won't name the person, but I remember the person that I was reading. But I also could be forgetting. But anyways, continue.
I'm quite sure that if it wasn't the first one, it was the second that you came in like, gangbusters and were giving full readings to people, you know? And you see how it is for most people who are beginning. You just dip your toe in. Most people offer little details that come through and don't dare to take it further, and it's important to help them to breathe through it and follow each image, as you know how it works, and go with what and share what comes forward. But most people need to be coaxed into that. Not you. You never needed to be. I never once, not that I mind, I and it's fine, I enjoy helping people, but I never once had to help you. Never once. You always just knew. You just intuitively knew. And it's fine either way to be helped or not, but that's your path. So
Thank you for saying that, and I'm glad that's how it all came across. Because
it's
it's
not how it
funny.
felt, I know.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's interesting because perception. It's so interesting to talk about perception, how people perceive you versus how you are thinking you're being perceived. Like when I would do, and still when I do readings, doesn't happen as often as it used to. Maybe within the last 2 years, especially in the last year, I feel like I've improved in this respect of not overthinking what comes through. I used to overthink it a lot. And the way I would not cover, the way I would deal with that is to keep talking instead of pausing. And as I told you before, I'm a chatty Cathy. So it's talking and chatting is the way I kind of deal with feeling unsure, uncertain. So, but I'm glad it came across the way you just said it. But I feel like your circle, you and your circle, what it brought out of me was honestly something that probably was not probably, it was always there. And you mentioned the propensity you felt that you grew up with. And even I believe we all have this ability. I think some people maybe, and you said this on a recent podcast episode of yours, like singers, you have different types of singers. They could all be good singers, but they all sound different. They don't all sound the same just because they're all good singers. And I think that's the same case with different modalities within psychic abilities and
Hmm.
mediumship.
Hmm.
And now I know, even though I always thought before 2021 that this is reserved for other people, not me, I go to those people. I don't do this stuff. I realize now there was so much in my life, whether it was my interest, and you say this a lot, that interest counts for a lot, whether it was my interest in the supernatural, the obsession with it, or the vibes that I would feel walking into a room, that this was actually always with me. And
Hmm.
I just didn't, this goes back to conditioning, how we're raised, but I just never understood it as, oh, I'm intuitive as well, the way we all are.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I too always knew when a house was particularly active, would even point it out and say that house is haunted. That house is haunted. And the people I was with would be like, "Uh-huh, okay, great." But but I never understood really how much further that goes. Knowing that I just didn't have the tools at the time to take it further, and I think that's because of how long ago it was and the way things were then and how it wasn't as an accepted a thing. But also just to say that for the people, like your metaphor of singers, and some singers are considered, it's all personal, it's all subjective, right? But some singers are better than others, some singers are this, some singers are that. Mediumship is the same. I think the difference is that if you are vulnerable, if you're willing to be vulnerable and surrender and not know, and be willing to be wrong and to look silly, then you can become Pavarotti as a medium. You know what I mean? Anyone can develop into that as long as they have those qualities. And a lot of people don't have those qualities, especially the quality of humility. You know, it's very hard to be humble. And it's the most important thing to be, especially as a medium. So without that, you're not able to be vulnerable. You're not able to trust. You're not able to be wrong. You're not able to learn. And so you can't develop past that tone, you know, that tone deaf voice that you have. Or maybe you sing pretty well, but you could sing a lot better if you would only open yourself a little more to what could be. And that's I think the only limitation that exists in terms of reading and connecting.
I would like to hit on real quick the that quality of humility, and I want to ask you more about your take on that in this way. So you mentioned you and I have talked about people like John Edwards and Sylvia Brown. We could talk about Teresa Caputo, Tyler Henry, but I'm actually thinking more about when I used to be up late at night or the TV would be on in the 90s and you see psychics on TV and you had like James Van Praagh, John Edwards. Those are the ones that I remember seeing on talk shows and morning shows. I think James Van Praagh had his own show at some point. I forget. What do you notice being the difference in how intuitive workers, whether they be psychics and or psychic mediums, how people in this realm portray themselves or put themselves forward then versus today,
Mm,
especially with the internet having advanced so much since the 90s and social media?
mm. I wonder if more and more people are beginning to understand that we all have these gifts. And so it's not this like special thing that you hoard anymore. You know, like I think of Sylvia Brown, for instance, who had a very harsh, aggressive way of communicating. And not to disparage her, but, you know, she seemed very, you know, she had a certain quality, right? We'll just leave it at that. And I at that time when she was going on Montel Williams and all those shows, that was a time when it was believed that only certain people were mediums, and that was the across the board belief. I think I mean in this culture, I think probably in other cultures it's different, but in the Western world that was the belief. Only some people are mediums, and everyone else is just like there to listen and you know speak to their loved ones. And so maybe there was a little bit of ego in that, and also a jealousy of the art. I think that happens with a lot of artists as well, where they just love their gift so much and they love practicing it so much that they become competitive and jealous of others who also practice it, and so they begin to hoard it. And so I think maybe that might have played a role in the way in which humility didn't necessarily, you know. And then also there's just different personality types, and John Edward is also a pretty aggressive guy in the way he communicates and in his way of being, and that's just who he is, you know. And it's not a bad thing, it's just who he is. And I think though the people who are just the general population who are trying to get in touch with this side of themselves tend to be much more humble, because you know they're it's such an amazing it's an amazing thing to be open to, so you're kind of just in awe, and you are humbled by it. Most people, not all. But does that answer your question? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it definitely does because I think something I'm excited about. First of all, I you alluded to this a little bit before, and I'm going to echo what you briefly said much earlier in this episode. I feel so lucky that we get to live in this era. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's so many reasons I could say that as a gay man, living in this country in this era, as a practicing medium. That there's so many things about. I'll speak for me personally that are more and more being embraced in the way there are a lot of things happening to be against us in different ways, but I think people are way more open than they used to be, and I'm thankful for that. And I think it's really exciting as someone like myself who grew up with organized religion, where you have a priest, and the priest is the one you you trust with your part of your faith, a big part of your faith. it's exciting to me that we have this energy today. More people are talking about everyone having the ability to connect and having
Hmm.
psychic being psychic. Um, and what I feel personally is when people make it so much about themselves, and I don't think there's anything wrong with being a celebrity psychic or celebrity medium.
No.
I think there has to be a humility that comes with it. And when the only vibe you give off is look at me, look at me, look how powerful. That's the thing, power.
Yeah.
Look, there's a lot of power in humility, but not a lot of power in ego. Look how
Yeah.
powerful I am. You
Yep.
should rely on me. It kind of brings me back to, well, that's how I felt in organized religion. There's the one person, head of a church, that you put all your faith and trust in as the representative of your higher power. There you go, higher power.
Hmm.
And so on things like social media, I notice a lot of people with a lot of followers, sometimes 100 followers of all types of clout, levels of clout, making it so much about themselves. And instead, um, and there's room to give ourselves credit for the work we do, absolutely. But I think there's so much humility and so much grace in saying, yes, I give myself credit for this, but I am also co-piloting or like doing this alongside our higher power, my higher power spirit.
That's right.
And in the 90s, I'm thinking of the 90s, that's what I'm remembering. It's funny, I was rewatching all episodes of Will and Grace, and there's one episode where John Edwards is in the episode doing book signings, and Sean Hayes, I forgot, Jack, this was character, he's like so excited to meet John Edwards. And I'm like, this is really weird and funny, this medium unwilling, this super gay, hilarious, it's just so random. And I think, and this is no comment on John Edwards or anybody who is a celebrity medium or psychic, it can so easily slip into a cult of personality
That's right.
instead of like the work itself, the focus on the work, the
That's right.
healing work itself.
I mean, I don't know how I would respond if I gained the kind of visibility that John Edward or Tyler Henry has. You know, I don't know. I would like to think that I would maintain my humility, but I just don't know. I can't say because I'm not in their shoes. And I think that's just a common problem with humanity today is that somebody gains enough power and then everybody treats them as though they are that power, and then they lose control of their own ego and they do something bad. And that's not to say John Edward is that, or but like Osho or you know the Bikram yoga, Bikram, or just all of these people who John of God, who behave badly after a while because the power begins to kind of um, infiltrate their ego. But I do think that I do think there's a way to counter that. I just think that it probably happens overnight for a lot of people. So they just get lost in the power and forget who they are. It's I feel for them. It must be hard. It's easy to sit in judgment, and I'm not saying that's what you're doing, but it's easy for me to sit in judgment and say, how dare Sylvia Brown be so aggressive on but I'm not Sylvia Brown. I don't know what that's like. So
I 100% agree. I may not vibe with someone's delivery of something, but there's a crowd for everything. And if people resonate with somebody, then they resonate with it. Like I always tell people, when you book a reading with me or any medium, you can go to any medium. There's hundreds of thousands of us out there. Why are you choosing one medium? Because you connect with them in some way. Their personality, their communication style clicks with you. And if I don't click with you, that's okay. This message is going to come through another medium for you. It's the message, spirit and the messages, they're going to find their way to you somehow. So
mhm,
that's why I think it's so important for us to make it so not all about us.
mhm,
And it really is a dual effort with
mhm,
spirit.
mhm.
Um, I would like to switch gears, and because I really want to get this in here. I would love to talk about your podcast, Medium Mystic. What inspired, first of all, it's a great name. I've told you that before.
Thank
Awesome
you.
name. What inspired you to start your podcast?
Well, I really love to have these kinds of conversations that we're having now. And I love to delve into all spiritual topics, philosophical topics. I find myself often pondering certain ideas, certain things, having spiritual revelations about things, and I like to be able to discuss them with people. And I there were some who were available for 2 hours on a on any given day who could have the conversation, but it's hard to find people who are available for that on a regular basis. So really I started it so that I could have those conversations with people. And I also have a calling um to spread certain ideas that have probably already been spread. It's not that they're original ideas, but it's just pushing certain ideas out there as much as possible to get them into the general public as much as possible. And that doesn't mean that anybody's even listening. They don't have to, people don't even have to hear it. Just the words being put out there puts the idea out there, I firmly believe. So I really wanted to do that as well. And I had a website a blog that I wrote for a while, that kind of did the same thing, and it was focused on pain and the idea of processing pain and how important it is to be with the pain as opposed to running from the pain. And it kind of feels like an offshoot of that, just trying to discuss the things that are often not discussed as much as possible.
I think it's so important to have this outlet, and if not for it to be heard by other people, and I totally resonate with what you said. It's not so much about how many are listening. I think it's such a great way for us to express how we're feeling or thinking about something. And have
Mm-hmm.
you found that you've been that person? Because I have found this for myself. You've been that person that people like, you want to talk about these things with some people in your life, and they're like, who cares? Why do you want to talk about that? Why are you thinking so hard? And I'm here like, but it's so cool. And I'm, don't you wonder? And
Yeah.
sometimes you feel
Yes.
like you're the only person who wonders all the big questions.
Yes. I find myself fortunate because I have people like you in my life who are interested. It would, I mean, when I was in my 20s, I was surrounded by atheists, like I said. So nobody was interested in having these conversations. They poo-poo it. So I don't know. I I was really missing something then. And I often wonder if that's why my life exploded, because I needed to be able to live in this world and not be avoiding, this world, the spiritual world. But yeah, I just lost my train of thought. Totally lost my train of thought.
All good. It'll come back. I think I think also for me, having since I've started developing my abilities, I've met people like you through the facilitation of the group, other people in the group that make me feel like, oh, I'm not the only person who asks quote unquote life's big questions and
Mm-hmm.
questions about mortality, and it makes me feel way less weird than I ever thought I was before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I
Yeah.
think people, what I remembered when you said that, what I was going to say, I think people are also, it's not that they're not interested, it's that their brains either don't work that way or they're nervous about sounding stupid, you know?
Yep.
And so they don't want to go there. Uh, it's hard. It's really hard to share something really that feels really deep and important, and to have someone say, "That cool, nice."
And
And
yeah,
that's it.
yeah. Yeah,
It's
and I
better
think
than shut up, but
yeah. Yeah. Or like, did you just make a face? Like,
right, right.
well, I think also the fear, I was gonna say fear, and you hit on the fear of sounding ridiculous or stupid or wrong. But I think also there's a fear. People are very afraid. Many people, not all people, many people I think are afraid to face the idea, well, not the idea, the fact of mortality.
Yeah.
And I find it very interesting in an age of so much exposure through the internet and social, especially social media, the age of using filters, the age of many different ways and increasingly an increasing list of ways to try and look younger, feel younger. There is also this growing interest in, what does my astrological chart says? What about my past lives? What happens after we die? And I don't think it's the first time I think about it this way, and I'm exploring this live with you now, talking out loud, thinking out loud. I just find it interesting the convergence of these two things happening at the same time. And I think
Hmm.
the people have always been fascinated with the idea of immortality, like never dying and staying youthful. But it seems like um there's just such an obsession with I can only speak for my lifetime. I've never lived 200 years. Well, I did, but in another other body.
Mm-hmm.
But in this era, I just feel like there's such an obsession with trying to live for as long as we can and appear young for as long as we can, as well as this growing interest in the things we're talking about here. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
there's a mistake in that. And I think
No,
that people tend to fear talking about mortality, but you can't escape it, obviously.
you can't. And as someone who is has I have someone very close to me who has faced her own mortality and is facing her own mortality. And so it's easy for those people to not want to face it when they don't have to face it. And I often think about her when I'm talking about this stuff and doing this work, because I wonder if she said if she thinks to herself, and I'm not going to go into detail about it, but if she thinks to herself, must be nice to be, talking to the dead when, I may be dead. I'd love to be able to be talking to the dead and thinking about that rather than thinking about my own death. um but that's just a kind of a side note. But the idea of the youth culture and the trying to remain youthful, I think the juxtaposition of the interest in past lives, in astrology, in the Akashic records, I think the juxtaposition is hopefully going to take us out of that. I love becoming older, is becoming wiser, is becoming more knowing, is becoming wholer and fuller. Your hair growing white means that you've experienced. The wrinkles mean that you've experienced. It's a gift. Not an old fool is a young fool. So all older people aren't necessarily wise. And hopefully we'll get to a point where we're able to grow and youth and then become old and be even more wise, right? But generally speaking, the option is there to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow until we shift into the next phase of birth, right? So I don't understand this need to, I mean, I want to look good. I don't want to, try to take care of myself and look as good as I can and all that. But, I just think we need to let go of this obsession with youth. It's just, youth is great. It's innocent. It's pure. It's often free from concern, although tell that to a foster child and you'd have a different answer. But,
Hmm.
most young people are free in a way that older people are not. But then you become old and you know things that you didn't know when you were young. Why would that be a bad thing? And why would the white hair that comes with it that shows you what you've become be a bad thing? Why? I just don't get it.
Yeah, I think there's so much. I mean, we can talk about how a child is raised to I mean, there's cultural values and how culture sees age, maybe the way we're raised and how our parents talk about themselves getting older. There's so many messages that come at us to influence that.
Yeah.
And I think about myself. I might have shared this with you, but you probably also heard it on the this podcast or maybe elsewhere. But I often talk about my struggle of body image dysmorphia and worthiness, and doing this work, developing this ability. It hasn't, erased my insecurities with my body, but I can definitely say has contributed a lot to me seeing my body as like I have my goals with my body, and I'm still learning how to do this. It's a long journey, but how to respect the vessel I've been gifted, but not identify,
Mm-hmm.
have that be my sole identity.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, we want to take care of ourselves. We want to feel good, look good, and that not be the sole source of our identity. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's what I'm excited for. The more people get interested in this realm of things is, I don't judge. I like, for example, I don't judge a psychic medium who gets cosmetic surgery. You got to do what makes you feel good. I'm not in their head to know that that's their sole identity is their appearance. I don't know that. But my hope is that regardless of what people do with their bodies, that they just see their bodies as an adornment, a vessel they want to take care of or beautify however they want, but that their real identity is sourced in their soul.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm excited for, is people coming to that realization more and more.
And I think they will. I think I think humanity is going to a place, and this is the type of thing that is not really possible to say to most people who are not interested in these kinds of conversations. But I think because they just go, oh, okay. But but I think that humanity is coming to a place where we begin to process our pain and our suffering and our emotions within ourselves, integrate it into ourselves so that we evolve to a place where we become more still, we require less energy, and we and certain physical characteristics evolve from that. And this is hundreds and hundreds, thousands of years in the future, but I think it's where we're headed. And I think it all has to do with that spiritual healing that needs to take place so that then the body begins to shift and transform with the stillness of meditation, the stillness of quiet, the no longer needing the material to drive everything we do, no longer needing to be constantly busy and constantly working and constantly, I think that's where we're going. And I think that AI might help with that rather than be the end of all that is. I think maybe it might, if we can grow to that place where we heal, then we may be able to use AI to do the things that today we have to do so that we have that time to be free to grow and prosper in our emotional and spiritual health, and get the money and the support that we need from the big pot in the middle of the group. And in other words, I guess I'm talking about socialism here or something, which is just such a bad word to most people. I don't get it, but it's just going to take a long time for us to get to that place where we're able to give everybody an equal amount of sustenance and not feel like one needs more than the other, and that there's some moral judgment about being poor. I mean, I hope that I'm never rich. I would prefer to be a little person. And it's like Yeshua said, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into heaven. So, I don't have that kind of value judgment on money and wealth, but I do think we can get to a place where we're all even and equal. And who knows what kind of things. Maybe we'll grow wings. Maybe we'll grow back the tail. Who knows?
Well, yeah, I think there's so many things you said that I loved. Number one, our mental well-being, which for me is very much everything's tied to spiritual well-being. But I think the way we take care of ourselves spiritually affects our mind, affects our body. So I definitely think there's a connection between how we treat ourselves and how we connect to ourselves and therefore to our higher power, which to me, they're the same thing. That can show up in the body in different ways. I truly believe that. And yeah, I'm all about, I think right now we're in this, in this moment where we're questioning as a society, how can we live in community and make sure everyone has a fair shot or an equitable shot at life, and that no one goes hungry, no one goes homeless. We're still battling those things so hard right now.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think in terms of the modalities and the tools we use, you mentioned AI. Like for me, it's so easy for me to be afraid of things like AI. However, the one thing I always know, like anything in life that is in the physical world can be weaponized for good or for bad, or it could be used for good. The internet is a great example of that. Look how it connected you and me. We live in the same city, but I maybe wouldn't have met you as easily or ever if it weren't for the internet
Mm-hmm.
and social media. So it can be a tool for good, as well people can take it and use it another way.
Mm-hmm.
And who's to say that something like AI can't help make life easier and help us prosper on a
And
personal level?
stop focusing on work and just slogging through each day, working. We don't need to be doing that we can get to a place where we don't need to do that anymore. It's in our evolutionary history to do that. We had to hunt and gather, and it was much harder then than it is now, but we are heading to a place where we don't need to anymore, I think. And AI might play a role in that. I mean, when electricity came into existence, many people were terrified of it. Many people wouldn't even have anything to do with it. In fact, I watched a documentary about Tesla recently, and it was from some guy was being interviewed from like the early 90s, and he was talking about his great grandmother who experienced that shift, probably in a smaller town.
As in Nikola Tesla, right? Or
Yeah,
Tesla? Oh yeah, Nikola
Nikola
Tesla,
Tesla, yeah,
not the car company.
not the car company,
Nikola
Nikola.
Tesla. Yeah.
And so his great grandmother experienced the shift from candlelight to energy to electricity, and until the day she died, she would cover outlets with those like baby things that protect babies from getting electrocuted, because she thought that the electricity leaked out of the outlet and might cause damage, which she could be right. I mean, I'm not laughing at that. Who knows? But it's normal to be afraid of things that are so foreign. I don't quite understand how AI is foreign at this point. You know, to me, it's
We
just
already use it. We've used it for a long time.
yeah, it's an extension of what we're already doing. But I'm sure things will come to light that are, you know, another wowzer thing.
Yeah, more to come on that. We'll see what journey that all leads us into. Before we wrap up, I want to give you the chance to share with folks how they can learn more about you, your circle, and your podcast.
Absolutely. My podcast is called Mediumistic, MediumyStic. It can be seen on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel, and also listened to on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And I have a website, www.kristen-harlow.com. And what was the last thing you asked? Oh, Circle. Free weekly psychic medium circle at Meetup. You just have to join Meetup and sign up for the circle. And then when you RSVP, you can join. And Juan can provide that information if it isn't clear or it's hard to find. But I think if you look it up, you'll find free weekly psychic medium circle, because most of them aren't free.
Yeah, and I think that your group, it might say like it was created or it's based in New York City, but it's open to everybody. And we've had
That's
people
right.
from Australia, the
Yep.
UK. I think we had someone from, I don't know about India. We had someone from somewhere else, but it's always growing. And I feel like it's continues to grow. I mean, there
Oh
were
yeah.
20 people the last time I was on, which is a
Yeah.
big group. So
Yeah.
I will definitely share that in the episode notes for everybody.
Great.
So, thank you so much, Kristen. You know, I always love chatting with you, and this was really special to interview you.
It was really fun. Thanks, Juan.
If you have a question or topic you want me to cover on Third Eyesight, head to my website, juanfranciscospirit.com/contact, and send a message my way. If you really enjoyed this episode, leave a review wherever you listen. I'd really appreciate it.